They laughed when I showed up in dusty boots holding a faded deed, they mocked me when I said the 900-acre lake ranch was mine, and HOA Karen smiled from the balcony of a mansion she built on my land like a queen who thought the law would never touch her. But what happened next destroyed her fortune, shattered the HOA, and turned the entire county upside down. So if you love shocking reversals, courtroom revenge, and entitled bullies finally getting what they deserve, subscribe now, because this story proves that patience, paperwork, and truth can be more powerful than money and arrogance combined. When my grandfather passed away, the lawyer's call felt routine until he said the words that made me pull over on the side of the road and sit there shaking, because apparently the old man everyone thought was just a quiet fisherman had left me a 900-acre lake ranch hidden behind layers of outdated records, unpaid taxes that had already been resolved decades ago, and a boundary dispute that no one bothered to reopen because everyone assumed the land was worthless marsh. But when I finally drove out there weeks later, I realized why my grandfather never talked about it, because the place had been swallowed by an aggressive homeowners association whose manicured signs claimed private roads, private shoreline, private everything, and right at the center of it all, sitting on the highest ridge overlooking the lake, was a massive glass and stone mansion with fountains, helipad markings, and a wrought iron gate bearing the HOA president's name, Karen Whitlock. And the moment I parked my truck outside the gate, a security guard marched over and told me I was trespassing, and when I calmly said I was there to inspect my inherited property, he laughed so hard he had to lean against the gate, radioed someone, and within minutes Karen herself appeared, dressed like she was stepping onto a magazine cover, smiling with that tight, rehearsed politeness that dripped with contempt, and she told me this land had been HOA controlled for over 15 years, that I should take my little inheritance fantasy elsewhere, and that if I didn't leave immediately, she'd have me cited. But instead of arguing, I thanked her, took photos, and drove away, because my grandfather had always said that when someone is that confident, it's usually because they haven't checked their foundation. And over the next few weeks I dug through county archives, dusty survey maps, handwritten easements, and old zoning rulings until the picture became horrifyingly clear. The HOA had expanded illegally, quietly absorbing land that didn't belong to them, bribing surveyors, leaning on underfunded county offices, and filing paperwork that no one challenged because the original owner, my grandfather, had been overseas for years caring for my grandmother and then passed without updating records. And Karen's mansion was not just slightly over the line, it sat dead center on my land, septic system, access road, shoreline dock, everything, which explained why the HOA fees in that area were suspiciously low and why no one talked about the northern shoreline. So I filed a quiet title action, served notice to the HOA, and that's when the real bullying began, with anonymous threats, fake liens, social media posts calling me a land grabber, and even a cease and desist letter claiming the land was community heritage property. But every time they tried to scare me, my attorney smiled wider, because their aggression only created more evidence. And when the first court hearing arrived, Karen showed up with 3 lawyers, a tailored suit, and a smug expression that evaporated the moment the judge reviewed the original 1950s deed showing uninterrupted ownership that transferred cleanly to me, followed by aerial photographs proving the mansion had been built only 7 years earlier without proper permits. And suddenly Karen's confidence cracked, but she doubled down, accusing my grandfather of abandoning the land, claiming adverse possession, and even suggesting the lake itself had shifted boundaries, which might have worked if not for the dam records, soil surveys, and witness statements from retired county engineers who remembered the HOA being warned to stay off that parcel. And as the case dragged on, the truth unraveled faster than anyone expected, because once discovery opened, we found emails where Karen openly bragged about building first and daring anyone to challenge her, spreadsheets showing HOA funds diverted to her construction, and internal messages calling my grandfather deadweight who won't fight back. And when those emails hit the courtroom, the room went silent, the judge leaned forward, and Karen's lawyers stopped making eye contact. But the twist that broke everything came when a former HOA treasurer testified that Karen had ordered records destroyed and pressured the board to approve emergency votes while key members were on vacation, which legally invalidated years of HOA decisions. And overnight, the case stopped being about my land and became about fraud, misuse of funds, and criminal conspiracy, leading to a county investigation that froze HOA accounts, halted ongoing construction, and placed liens on Karen's assets. And still she tried to settle, offering me a fraction of the land's value, lifetime access to the lake, and a public apology that felt more like a threat. But I refused, because my grandfather didn't endure decades of silence just for me to walk away quietly. And when the final ruling came down, the judge declared the mansion an illegal structure built on stolen land, voided the HOA's claim to nearly half its territory, ordered restitution to affected homeowners, and gave Karen 90 days to vacate before demolition, and the sight of her standing on the courthouse steps, mascara streaked, shouting about injustice to cameras that no longer cared, was surreal. But the real fallout came later when homeowners realized their inflated property values were built on lies, lawsuits piled up, board members resigned, and the HOA dissolved under the weight of its own corruption. While I stood on the ridge one quiet morning, watching crews dismantle the mansion piece by piece, not with joy but with a strange sense of closure, because the land finally felt like it could breathe again, and I rebuilt not a mansion but a modest lodge, restored public access paths my grandfather had once envisioned, protected the shoreline, and turned the ranch into a conservation lease that still earns income without exploiting the land, proving that sometimes the biggest victory isn't revenge or wealth, but restoring something stolen and showing everyone that arrogance can buy marble and glass, but it can't rewrite the truth buried in old paper, patient hands, and a legacy that refuses to stay silent.